Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Nevers. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, this episode creates a very interesting situation where basically Masson and his people have decided to kind of make it so that Malady, now that she's captured, they're going to publicly execute it. Yes, it's kind of a thing of, yeah, she kind of deserves to be executed, like it is just justice running its course, but they want to make a public spectacle of it, which even people amongst that group don't agree with it, because it is one of the members, he's the prince. It's like, yeah, my cousin, yeah, who's the kid. It's like, yeah, we know, you literally never give us a chance to forget it. But it's, for him, it's like, Masson kind of makes it seem like, oh, you just have you are very fond of the touch or whatever, so that's why you're kind of skewing this way. But it is a thing of they did away with public executions 30 years ago, but now it's we're doing this, and it's obviously it's even something Harriet says. It's the fact of the matter is they're only doing this because Malady's touched, because it's meant to make a point. The fact of the matter is all he's going to do is rile up the entire city, and that's kind of what he wants, because riling up people behind this serial killer, this touch, it's going to do what he wants it to, because basically he's this country has been infected with an illness. This empire has been infected by an illness that needs to be rooted out. We need to find a cure for it. And so the touch have been kind of given this leeway in certain regards. And obviously this is Masson's way to kind of rally that hate and that anger so that he can turn that against the touch. Even going to the Beggar King, and it's I kind of used your dude to kind of go after Amalia and made it seem like the word came down from you, but the fact of the matter is I need you to sow a little chaos because of everything. It was even interesting because the Beggar King made a comparison of the touch are going to change everything, and for him it's the world adapted to the longbow being introduced, so it's I'm going to adapt to this. It's humanity found a way to kind of adapt going forward with everything, so that was kind of his message. But essentially he's basically he's the world is full of chaos, really kind of saying there is no real order to things. The world is chaos, it always has been. Men like you and me, we cut out a little piece of order kind of for ourselves, but it's and so Lord Masson wants him to so more chaos, not too much, but not too little, just enough that kind of gets the fans of flames and the rage burning within the people. So there's that. There's Mundy, who doesn't agree with all of this either. Obviously, he's talking to Mrs. Boyle, and she wants to get a chance to talk to Malady, and it's no, she'll kill you in 4 minutes. Well, then just give me 3 minutes and 30 seconds. It's no, I can't let you do it. It's he doesn't agree with what they're doing. Yes, Malady needs to be brought to justice, but for him, he sees this isn't justice. All this is going to do is just rile people up heavily. He sees what this is going to eventually lead to. So even later on in the episode, he tries to do everything he can to appease that. And obviously this turns into a complicated, interesting conversation at the orphanage too, because it's a thing of Malady deserves to die, but it's also the thing of, there's also the conversation in the newspapers that Desiree is reading of what does that mean for us in the grand scheme of things? Basically, it's the thing of we bring out our inner monsters. We're here killing this monster, but the way we're going about it, we're kind of enjoying it. It's a little sick how everyone's just rallying to kind of gather for this public execution, and lavishing in it. It's basically we're killing this monster, but in the process, are we awakening our own inner monsters in the process? And as the fact of the matter is our own animalistic things. The fact is that we are doing this is so very primal and animalistic. So it's that is almost the thing of once again, that thing of man is the greatest monster of all. When it comes to something they don't understand, how that hate and that rage can kind of consume them. And especially in this particular case, once again, Malady did some terrible shit. She deserves punishment, but it isn't meant to be this spectacle. Obviously, we learn more. We learn the name of the thing, or rather the beings, or whatever that Amalia is. Once again, it seems she's the only one that's actually one of these things. We still don't know, they still haven't revealed, what Amalia's circumstances are. Like I said, I think she's legitimately one of those things, because the real Amalia True died when she jumped in the water, and one of those beings, a Galanti, maybe, possessed her. So that's kind of been my running theory for a couple episodes now, or maybe after. No, I think it was like after last episode that kind of like solidified that in my mind. But it's like she just never directly says it. But now it's like the thing of like I guess she filled everyone into like what she does know because they're just throwing around the term Galanti. It's like we've never used that word until now, and just all of a sudden we're tossing it around like. But to be fair, it's also a thing of like apparently, and they kind of give you a time frame. It's been a month since last episode, so like. So that's a lot of information to kind of get filled in because it's like, right, like who was talking through Mary's song to us, in particular to you, it's the Galanti, which we see Lavinia wanting to destroy it because even Horatio kind of looks at it as potentially a cure, which I even thought was kind of interesting where Amalia was like, wait, they kill women and this is the sin, and Horatio, because it's just the thing of like, it's already bad enough in just this time frame, just for all the people who were touched in this regard. But also, you add on top of that, like, oh, we're also we got these special powers, and that alienates us even more. So it's a thing of like, at the very least, if we got some cure, figure this thing out. It seems like some people are leaning towards a cure. At least Horatio is. Like, whether everyone feels that way, who knows? But the fact is, if a cure came, like at the very least, they wouldn't have the public hate that they get. Like, yeah, I mean, given the time frame and everything, there would be other reasons why people would hate them and disrespect them and not really, but it's like, they wouldn't have a voice for many other reasons, but being touched, just like, it's not even a cherry on top, it's a whole drum of sprinkles. I don't know where I was going with that metaphor, I apologize, but, also, like, Horatio and Amalia hooking up, like, multiple times throughout the episode was kind of interesting. And, like, anytime, like, Penance is kind of walking by, and she kind of hears that, she kind of leaves the room. And then, like, she sees, like, Desiree is with, like, Nimble Jack, which now he's kind of here, and he's kind of helping out. Because it's like, yeah, like, just because Amalia told me to, I got a lot of weight off of me. Because of Desiree, in many different regards. I also like the, like, dynamic between Jack and, Annie, like the whole like throwing fire and Jack's like blocking it, and it's like, yeah, I'm told to stay away from silverware, basically anything that I might steal because they don't completely trust me yet. So I thought that was kind of a fascinating element to it. But I also love the thing with well, circling back before I move on, what's the whole Lavinia thing I was bringing up. She was saying like, okay, let's break this thing because I think she thinks that she can like. She believes she can save the touch potentially if she destroys it because it's like this has something to do with the touch, and or whether she realizes that or not, whatever the case may be, it resonates on some level to the point that she's like, this needs to be destroyed, which even the Dr. Dude's like, I can't. We didn't crack that. That thing cracked on its own, so we have no means of like doing any damage to it. So for him, he talks, it's a conversation about like, what the kind of future could hold for this, like, because for Lavinia, it's like things are already bad enough because of Malady's execution, which he's like, I'm from America, we have public executions all the time, like, we kind of watch it. Obviously here in London, it's been banned for like 30 years, but Lavinia's kind of hoping that this, whatever this is, whether it is to break it or whatever, that it would have some answers, whether it be a cure from like, hey, it itself can be a cure, or whether maybe killing it's a cure for the touch, like in her own means. It makes me wonder, does she know that Augustus is one, and is that why she's so devoted to this as well? Or is it just like I'm still unclear on why Lavinia takes such an interest in the touch the way she does, And once again, like, does she know what the doctor's up to? That was interesting because the lady who has, like, the telekinesis or the levitation ability, I can't remember, it's a levitation ability. As she was kind of there, like, there was kind of a moment that, like, she lifts up, like, the bucket or whatever, and then, like, someone else nearby was looking at her. I was like, because when we've seen her previously, like, subsequently, since the doctor basically lobotomized her, we never saw her using her power, so I'm wondering if being in close proximity to the Galanti, like, whether she was kind of reacting to that, and, like, some of that spark that was taken from her kind of came back, like, part of who she was came back just for an instant. Now, whether, that ends up being a case of, like, no, she came back and she just played the role of, like, oh, I'm not bad, but I don't know. There's a lot we still don't know about all of this. Obviously, there's also the interesting development of, okay, so there's a conversation between, Augustus and his sister, because obviously Lavinia's kind of got like a headache or something, and I'm wondering, does it have something to do with that light or being in proximity of the Galanti, like it did something to her? Because the whole point was like to keep shielding your eyes, because they don't know what being exposed to that will do to you. But now she's got a headache. She's like talking about it being behind her eyes. And obviously she's like disgusted by the way people are acting. It's like, oh, like the fact of the matter, it's like, oh, they will hanging her just kill her? Like, oh, maybe we should bring it, like they should like shoot her and stab her after the fact. And it's like, oh, why don't you show up and shoot her yourself? It's like, but what, ma'am, we're not murderers. It's like, oh, but you're not murderers, but you're sure as hell gonna show up and just be happy to watch someone die. It's like, why so many people in this city so gun-ho about it, you know? And obviously she doesn't want Augustus in town, but he's like, oh, I'm going to go here, set up like a birth thing or whatever. Also talks about, she's like, yeah, I want you to stay away from Swan. It's like, but Hugo's kind of my own, like, he's my friend. It's like, you know, he brings up like, oh, remember when we were younger and he made you laugh all day as we were like ice skating and stuff like that? She was like, yeah, he was pretty, you know, funny and charming when he was 10. And obviously, you know, also there's the element of like, yeah, his business is kind of going public now, so like the scrutiny it's going to be under, which to be fair, like their names are on it. I'm sure Augustus still hasn't brought it up to his sister, but I love later on when Penance is getting changed and she sees a bird outside her window. She's like, and she's kind of wondering, and then like she's like, Augie? And he's like, yes, because he had just walked in the room, and she's like, oh, were you spying on me with the bird? He's like, what? No, oh my god, no, of course not, that was me. I even love him being like, I think he said it was like a redwood or a redwing or something like that, and he said in a line I thought was so fascinating, he was like, oh yeah, they never listen to me. I was like, oh shit, so your power has limitations, because I guess it comes down to the bird's like willingness, like, fine, I'll listen to you, because I thought it was more so like he sees through their eyes, which he kind of does, but I guess it's like if they're not willing to listen to him, they're not going to open up their mind allowing that to happen. So, but he was like, no, I would never look at, you know, Spider-Man. He's like, oh, like you would never look to see like, you know, what a husband would normally see, because he's like, no, I'd never cross that line and stuff like that. And I love that she kind of entraps him a little bit. She's like, oh, so is my body not well suited or something? And he was just like, and you know, luckily Amalia shows up and like, am I interrupting? He's like, yes, please. It's like, Penance trapped you with entrapment right there, because it's like, if you admitted it, it would have been like, so you're contradicting yourself now. It would have been a whole issue. So I thought that was fascinating. But when it was all said and done, obviously it's the, you know, testing out the drill and everything. And obviously Augie knows some of what's happening. It's like, so what is down there? And it's like, you know, she's like, maybe the future and stuff like that. She's like, would it be okay if I just said hope? And Augie's like, that's all you had to say, you know? So I thought, but it's like, the drilling device doesn't go though as planned. Like, obviously some of her devices don't. So, but later on, there's a conversation between her and Amalia, because some of the people think she killed Lucy, and she's like, no, I didn't. And she's like, no, of course not. It's like, you know, I know, no, you wouldn't. She's like, no, I would kill her, but the fact of the matter is you didn't want me to. So like that in itself, you know, the fact is I wanted to means like, yeah, it proves that I actually didn't do it, because if I wanted to do it, I would do it, and I tell you I did it, kind of thing. But obviously it's like, well, don't you ever like think about forgiveness? It's like, oh, I wonder how Mary would feel about forgiving Lucy. And it's like kind of suggesting like it's a bit different, because it is a thing of like Lucy's actions led to Mary getting killed. It's not what she wanted, but she played her own role in it. Despite like her circumstances and everything, it's a tough situation considering her powers, considering what she did. She listened to Masson thinking like, oh, there was a cure. Like she got swept up in his BS because they're looked at as monsters. And I mean, to be fair, Lucy looked at herself like a monster. Like I killed my own baby, so like of course like what he said would resonate with her because of like just the pit of despair that's in her chest, you know. And kind of like almost like a cult leader, he was able to kind of tap into that and use it to his advantage. But Penance is kind of wanting like there to be some sort of forgiveness that like, you know, it's like if we just kind of hold on to all this, it's kind of like, well, what will we have at the end of it all, you know? And then obviously there's like, they go outside and there's nothing but nooses. So showing that like Melody's death, like what it means in the grand scheme of things. It's like, oh, kind of show, like, haha, you touched her, next, we're coming for you. So like Melody's execution whether it was public or not, like making it public does sway things to make people a lot more bold about like their like disdain of the touch, which I mean people were like very clear about their disdain of the touch anyway, but it makes it even more palpable. I butchered that word. You heard me like stutter my way through that. Jesus. Just the point is you can almost just taste it in here is what I'm trying to say. But because of that, Penance decides like, no, I'm not just going to help you with the Galanti thing. I'm going to actually save Malady, which she's like, what? Amalia being like, I want nothing to do with that, because it's like, you're talking about someone, yes, justice is happening. It's like, yes, but killing Malady in this way is just what it signifies for us. It's like, for her, it's like, in my good conscience, I've sat behind in the sideline and watched someone die. Like, I can't do that again. Like, not when there's a sign telling me not to, like, that I can do something. I can help. There can be another way to this. But it's just the difference of opinions between them, because like Amalia just kind of feels like Malady's a bit of a lost cause. Like there's no saving her, which is like, it's like, but for Penance, it is a thing where it's like none of us are completely lost. She believes that, like, yes, Malady can't be forgiven what she's done, but the fact is, does she deserve to be this public thing like this? Does she deserve to be basically the jump off point for coming after all of the touched, So in her own way, Penance is doing this not just for Malady, but for all of them, And so now, even Amalia being like, oh, did you think that I was going to come along with you and like change? It's like, no, like I completely disagree with what you're doing. And it's like, oh, mom and mom are fighting, So it's like, all right, all of you been listening. So basically, what are you going to do? Are you going to follow me, or are you going to follow Penance? And she's like, honestly, I'm not telling you what to do, but don't do that. I love that. And so, like, everyone's choosing sides. Horatio chooses Amalia's side. Harriet, Desiree end up choosing Penance's side. And you see the look of disappointment in her face when Augie chooses True, because, like, to be fair, he has his own role to play as kind of a distraction, but I think for him it's like, right, this could both want to kind of help the touch in their own way. It's kind of like helping Malady will help many others, but it's also like finding out about the Galanti, like, I don't know what the future holds, but the fact of the matter is this could give us answers to what we're supposed to do next and everything, I love that, like, Bonfire and Annie end up choosing Amalia, and then like Jack was following, but it's like, I will pay you. It's like, I kind of need you because you're kind of like the focal point of my plan. Primrose decides, like, she's like, I know you guys think I am the youngest one here, but the fact of the matter is, I think we shouldn't do anything. And she sits down. Myrtle wanted to kind of be a part of the operations, but she was kind of put on the sidelines. So I guess, and I think for her, it's like, I don't know who to choose between. So I think neither one would have really let her go either way. So. But it is a thing of, like, both are about to compete their operations. Because even Horatio, when he chose Amalia, was like, I wish you would reconsider, towards Penance. So each one's enacting their plan. I've got a glimpse of next week's episode. It seems like that's where we're going to find out everything that went down with Amalia's team. But the main focus this episode ended up being what Penance and the others are, like, concocting this plan and everything. It was an interesting element, too. Like, obviously, at the execution, Monday's like, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to, well, because there's also, like, that conversation because he had with Hugo earlier in the episode, because basically he's calling Hugo out for saying, like, come to this public execution because it's like, you're going to see blood, and it's like, yeah, that blood is also on your hands because of what you're doing, your business and everything, because essentially it's like you're supposed to be keeping these people safe. And I think for Monday, it's just like, for him in general, he wants people to be safe, people to be protected. That's what he believes in, because it was also a thing of like, why would you choose a job where you obviously hate it? And he says, because everyone else around me loves it. I think for him it's like, people who enjoy it kind of get swelled up in it and just kind of go, and then it's like, you need someone who hates the job so much to do it properly, to kind of swing the pendulum in the other direction. I think is kind of what he was getting at. But essentially, like, Swan was getting in trouble because basically one of his touch, like a client or whatever, ended up touching him, and there ended up being some bad fallout from it. So it's like, this touch could get in trouble, and it's like, it's like, yeah, I've got some paperwork and stuff like that, but it's like, no, like, you doing what you're doing is like using the touch like this is not only going to screw you over, but it's going to screw them over, and that's what pisses Monday off the most, you know? Which even, well, I guess that kind of, I'm curious. Well, because at the end of the day, Effie Boyle ended up talking to the Swan. We never actually found out what it is she asked of him. It was like a favor or something she needed. And it's like, I wonder what did, you know, I mean, maybe it had something to do about him being there at the execution, like, personally. I don't know. But at the, like I said, at the execution, you have Monday, like, gathering, you know, all right, let people in. After 400 people lock the doors, like, yeah, it's supposed to be a public execution. Never said anything about being packed. It's like he wants to try and maintain order as much as possible, you know? And so Masson and them are kind of watching everything, even kind of implying, like, sooner or later, it's like, yeah, the Beggar King's going to do what he needs to, but sooner or later, we'll come after him, we'll deal with him. You know, he needs to be eventually dealt with permanently. So they do the execution and everything, and there's, like, rumbling underground, which I'm assuming it has everything to do with, like, oh, Amalia's, like, because it was like, oh, because I thought, like, the Galanti were, like, reacting to to Malady, but it's like, no, it's probably, like, all, like, the other side of things, like, Amalia's team, like, what they're up to calls that rumbling. But, you also had, like, Harriet kind of stressing because she's like, oh, like, ultimately, like, her, like, well, I don't know if they're married yet, but they're dating and everything. And she's like, the moment we get married, like, he's going to eventually leave me because I'm, like, you know, it's like, we don't know what argument she had with him, but it's just kind of like a, go. Oh, Myrtle, she's smiling and waving you because she wants you to go. And it's just like, but now it's kind of like under the circumstances. She's like, oh, he's going to leave me. But Desiree's like, no, it's going to be fine. You guys are going to work it out, which I love. Penance being like, didn't you guys just hear me when I said shush? Didn't you hear my shushing earlier? But nevertheless, I thought that was, so obviously they're waiting for their moment to kind of strike. Obviously Monday sees what, Penance is doing and is like, oh, hey, and she kind of sends up the thing just as as Malady's about to be executed. And so, obviously, we had one of her other people all, like, setting stuff up. They're digging up stuff. I'm like, what's this about? What is that all for? And then in that moment, is like, Malady, like, she, you know, like, basically, Jack is throwing, like, the thing so that the other can, like, the other person from the orphanage can jump down and get to Malady. But Jack gets shot at, you know, that other person falls, and it's like, damn, it all kind of went to shit. But Malady, rather than helping with the being rescued, jumps down and breaks her own damn neck. Which I was always, well, we'll get to that later. And it's like, whoa. It's like she didn't want to be saved, but it's like, and then Monday's looking around, it's like she wanted all these people there. And it's like, then you have Penance being like, what's underneath all of this? Because she can, you know, electricity and everything. And he looks to the tent, and it's like, everyone get away from those metal railings. And obviously Penance runs over. They're trying to get some people off, but a lot of people are shocked. Luckily, they were able to pull some people off, but a lot of those people were electrocuted to death. It's like, oh, wow. So obviously this is going to rally things even more. But, well, I don't know if they would necessarily tie that back to Malady. To be fair, a whole bunch of other stuff came, but, like, the moment Penance goes in there, it's like the dude's like, yeah, they deserved a lot worse. She shuts off the power and stops it, but it's like, man, all those people that won a front row, the ones that were chanting, drop the bitch, they kind of got it the hardest. It's almost like, irony, I guess, poetic justice in a certain regard, but it's like, and, you know, immediately after that, people start stampeding, trying to get out. People kind of get separated, pushed, and you're like, oh, this is where people get stampeded. And at one point, Desiree and Harriet got separated, and people start falling, and Harriet, like, despite everything, it's like, all right, you know what, I'm going to use my power, and she freezes the door, and it's like, and in that moment, the crowd keeps pushing, and she gets trampled. It's like, luckily, Boyle came and pulled her away and handed her to Desiree and kind of took off, but it's like, which even I was like, oh, that's interesting of you to do that, and she's kind of wandering away, and I'm like, okay. And when it was all said and done, like, I wonder what made Lord Masson decide to help Hugo. Maybe there's something there where it's like, oh, Hugo was trying to reach up and he had a gunpoint and was like, all right, like, I guess despite you being all about the touch and stuff like that, I'll let it go and I'll help you. But then, like, we get Monday. Well, first and foremost, I believe everything with Penance and them come back and it's like, oh, is everything okay? And it's just kind of like both teams look pretty goddamn rough. And then, like, we see back at, execution, like, as they're lifting up Melody's body, her shoe falls off. And then Monday notices her toes. I was like, oh, her right hand! Like, because that was her whole thing of, like, she believed in the cause so much, she was literally sacrificing her body for it. And I was like, whoa, what's going on here? And then, like, Monday goes back to the office, and he's piecing it together. And it's like, because earlier he referenced the dead body that's like, yeah, it was supposed to be connected to Melody, but someone else set that up. So it's like, what is going on here? And then in that moment, he pieces it together, like, he figures it out. Because it's like, right, Mary talked about, like, the smart detective and everything. And it's like, he finally pieced it together. It was like, the Effie Boyle he's been talking to the entire time is Melody. Like, the real Effie Boyle was the body he found. Like, wasn't that episode 1? I was like, dude! I was like, so this... Because that's the thing, like, it wasn't... Because the thing is, I guess Melody killed Effie in a way to make it look like it's what was meant to look like a well, to be fair, like, maybe Melody accounted for the fact is that someone would make it look like a Melody murder, which for him would make him go, no, it's not a Melody murder because none of this tracks. So that means, once again, that means that this was planned out that far in advance, or was it just always like, did they already know about Effie's identity and they just decided to take advantage of it? It's like, well, she never got identified, so maybe it was a more recent thing that Melody came up with. I have no idea, but it's like, dude. And also knowing when they did the switcheroo, like the moment like Melody just came out of nowhere. I mean, to be fair, that makes sense why that went down so easy, because like that didn't make any sense, because maybe they explained it earlier. Maybe it was just always supposed to be like, oh, you kind of understand it yourself. I never quite understood what her power was. It's like, no, she gets stronger the more pain she feels. So I'm sure, like, in retrospect, it's like, I slammed her against the wall. She had just snapped back at me. That should have been the moment she got super strong and kicked my ass, but she didn't. But it's like, yeah, that was the whole point. I was like, wow, that's nuts, dude. And at the end, we see, like, her taking off everything and just kind of enjoying the chaos, because the Beggar King kind of helped set stuff up, obviously, the purists and everything like that. And it's like, obviously, other people being, like, down with the touch, they need to die or whatever, yada, yada, yada. So it's like, okay. So literally, London's up in chaos. Whether it's exactly what Masson wanted, and I think to a certain extent it was, or whether it ends up being a little bit more, because I think it's not going to be as easy to rein that back in as he thinks, because there's so many moving pieces to this puzzle at once. It's like, but Melody's free and just kind of enjoying the chaos, and it's like, so what she's going to do next maybe is going to be about the Galanti. Like, she does have her freedom now, so it's like Amalia and them kind of failed. Maybe she's going to go down there, and maybe that's going to jumpstart something else. I don't know. It's just a lot of, stuff. And once again, they think Melody's dead. At least Penance does. So not unless Monday comes in and like, yo, this is what happened. Melody's actually alive. You need to be careful. Even at the end, like, you had Annie, like, not at the end, but like when the groups were separating, Annie was like, yeah, I always had a feeling Melody had an escape plan. Never knew it was going to be you. It's like, oh, she had her own plan set in motion well before Penance got involved. So that's some stuff to get. There's also, like, what they had, like, in the back of the vehicle. It's like the switch accidentally gets flipped, and we see it kind of bubbling up. Like, I don't know whether it's supposed to be like a blimp or something, but it's like, I guess it doesn't matter, because it starts rising up, but they just kind of like ignore it, because I guess they're back home by that point, so it doesn't matter. But we'll see. Next week's episode is the season finale. I stuck around for the credits just to make sure, because I think I saw something somewhere saying it was going to be 6 episodes, but I wasn't sure. I guess it kind of makes sense, too, because this is kind of somewhat a British show. I don't know if it would be necessarily considered a British show. I mean, I think it's probably filmed in London, and most of the actors are British, probably with some exceptions and stuff like that, being like other Europeans. But, yeah, it's like, okay, where is this all going to take it? Like I said, I got to peek at the next week's episode in the sense that we see a little bit of what Amalia was up to, but where everything else goes, I have no idea. I'm so interested to see how this season ultimately ends up getting wrapped, but really that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.